Are you tired of shooting on a plain, boring white background? Well, in today's video, I'm going to show you 3 ways I completely transform a white background into something exciting. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here. I shoot in the studio all the time, and most of the time I'm shooting on plain seamless paper backgrounds, a lot of times on white or gray. And you might think shooting in the studio on solid backgrounds maybe after a while would get a little sterile or boring, but that is not true at all. I am constantly experimenting with lighting, and I'm never bored because I know some pretty powerful ways, some pretty powerful magic with lighting that I can transform a white background into, honestly, almost anything that I want it to be. And so I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite lighting magic tricks today. Now, before I give you a peek into these tricks, I wanted to let you know I have a brand new lighting guide out. It is the Creative Lighting Guide 3. And in these guides, in all of my creative lighting guides, I show you a variety of techniques that keep me excited in the studio. Everything from techniques like shutter drag to projecting on the background to using gels and so much more. So if you are interested in what I show you today, you'll definitely want to check that out. Okay, so now into the good stuff. I am going to show you how to transform a boring white background using 3 techniques. We're going to take a look at casting shadows on the background using an optical spot. Then we're going to look at how gels and using color can completely take a white background and make it into any hue you want. And then we are going to transform the entire studio, take us and transport us to someplace new by using a digital projector to project a scene on a white background. So in all of these shots, it doesn't scream boring. It doesn't scream sterile. In fact, they're super exciting, even though it's nothing more than a seamless white paper background. So with that, let's get started and take a look at our first technique for transforming a white background. One of the easiest ways to transform the look of a white background is to cast a shadow on that background. Now, there are many different ways to do it, but one of my favorites is using just a single light. But the key is a specialty modifier called the optical spot. Now, the Westcott optical spot is something that I use all the time in my work for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes I'm creating a slice of light down the subject's face. Sometimes I'm creating a pattern of light on the background. But what's great about this tool is if you know how to use it, you can actually transform this background and use a single light to light the subject and the background. So with the Westcott optical spot, there are 2 options for lenses. There is a 150mm lens, which is intended for close-up shots, and there is a 50, which is what we're going to be using in this setup. The 50 gives you a wider coverage of light. Now, with an optical spot or similar modifiers, they often have these little barn doors or little leaves that can go in and out. And what's nice is you can change the shape of light. So here what we've done is we've actually closed some of those leaves down to give us a slice of light. And there's actually 4 of them, so you can create all different configurations. And then you'll notice that the background has a crisp edge to that shadow. If you take the front of the lens, you can actually focus it to make those lines razor sharp, or defocus it if you want it to be a little bit more gradual and diffused of an edge. So here what we're going for is something that is graphic and clean with that slice of light, lighting the subject from head to toe. Now, you can make this more complicated and add more lights if you want to have a fill to give more detail to the shadows, or if you want to change the color of the shadows by adding a gel, which we're going to talk about later. That being said, one of my tips to make this even more interesting is not about adding another light, it's about you moving around. Now, when I'm having my subject facing me straight on and I'm shooting from the normal angle, I usually have my subject pretty close to the background. And the reason that I do that is the shadow edge will be a little bit smaller, it won't be as distracting. But if I move around to the side, there starts to be some interesting depth and dimension. I can include the subject shadow as part of the subject, as part of the interest in the shot. And so I'm regularly moving around, I'm having my subject step closer to the background, further from the background, and all of these variables make a huge difference. All right, so those are all the things I'm thinking about as I shoot this sort of lighting setup. It really is that easy. So let's bring our subject onto the set and let's get the shot. A plain white background does not need to stay white. In fact, you can change it to any color that you want when you use gels. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you just one technique of how I reinforce the concept of the shoot using color gels on the background. That being said, the sky's the limit. You can gel the background in a ton of different ways. You could do one solid color. You can have the colors gradate from top to bottom. You could put little spotlights of different color all across. It's truly endless what you can achieve. Now, that being said, if this is all new to you, I recommend you check out my class, The Magic of Gels, where I explain this all in depth and I show you a variety of different ways to change the color of the background. But there's just a couple of things I want you to keep in mind. First and foremost, when you're using gels, especially on a white background, you need to be very careful that your main light does not spill on the background. If the main light also hits the background, it washes out all your color, and then it's just gonna look kind of grayish with a little bit of color. It's definitely not what you were going for. So where we're going to begin is we're going to actually begin with the main light. We're going to build it in, but whatever main light that you choose, you need to find a way to restrict it. So this could be by adding a grid to the light. Could be feathering the light so it doesn't hit the background. It could be pulling the subject and the light further away from the background so because of fall off, it doesn't hit. But my favorite modifier, the Westcott optical spot, is a fantastic solution because I can literally create a narrow beam of light so that it only hits the subject and doesn't go anywhere else in the frame. So I'm gonna turn off all the lights and we're going to begin with our main light. Over here on the left-hand side of the frame, we have the Westcott optical spot with the 50mm lens so that it lights my subject's dress and face. All right, so beautiful light on her face. Now you will notice that the background isn't white anymore, it's black. And the reason that it's black is because there's no light hitting it, which is exactly what we need for this to work. So next, we're going to add a gel. And when we add a gel, I always try to use color theory to help me decide what colors to add. And so for this, I'm feeling maybe an analogous color scheme of oranges and yellows. And so what I'm going to do in this shot is add 2 lights with gels to the background. So where we are going to begin is kind of going off the color of her dress. We're going to take on the left-hand side a light with a grid. This is a 20-degree grid, which means the light is going to spread out quite a bit. And on it is an orange gel. So it's going to create a wash of orange across the background. So we'll begin with our second light. So what you'll notice is all that color is beautifully saturated across the background because there's no white light to wash it out. But there's something else you'll notice. You'll notice it's much brighter and maybe even a little bit more yellow in the top left-hand corner. And that's because, especially when I use yellow and orange gels, the brightness or darkness actually shifts the hue a little bit. Now, the reason I like this, and I'm using it purposefully, is I think it makes the background look a little bit more interesting. I could absolutely take the grid off, take the orange gel, and just evenly light the background. But having this kind of fade, I think makes the shot have a little bit more depth, a little bit more visual interest. So could go with just this, and I think it's beautiful, but I want to layer one more color on for a little bit more depth. I actually like how the background looks a little more yellow in the top and then it fades to kind of a dark orange on the edges. And so what we're going to do with our final light over here on the right-hand side is it is another 20-degree grid, but we have more of a yellow-orange gel. So let's take a look at that second light. And we have it pointed a little bit more behind our subject rather than on the edge of the frame. So the result of adding the second light is everything has a very sunset looking feel to it, which I think looks beautiful. And by the way, there's so many variations of this that you could do. For example, if you're not shooting full length, you could take a single light, probably with a yellow or orange gel, directly behind the subject with a grid and just have it glow from behind her. So it's brightest directly behind her and then it's a kind of shadows on the edges. You could add more lights. Right now we just have 2, but I could take multiple and have multiple little spotlights and it doesn't all have to stick to yellow orange. This is just one example and I think it looks really beautiful. Now, we could add additional light as a fill to change the color, but I actually think this is looking very sunset, moody, and romantic. So this is exactly what I'm going to shoot. But notice, it looks nothing like shooting on a white background. Instead, it's super saturated color. All right, so let's get the shot. One of the ways that I make a plain white background far more exciting is by using it to transport my subject anywhere I want them to, even to a fantasy land. And so that's what we're going to do in this setup. But the key to this technique is you have to have a digital projector. Now, it doesn't need to be anything fancy. The projector that I have over here is a standard home movie projector. It's around 3,000 lumens, but this is what we're going to use to light the white background. Now, the concept for this image is actually inspired by pop culture. I want to make some references to the movie Wicked, and so I'm going to transport my subject to the Emerald City. But of course, I need to begin by either finding an image or building an image that really channels the movie. So what I did for this background is I went to the text-to-image generator, the AI program called Midjourney. And in Midjourney, I typed a variety of prompts to help me create an environment. So as we look at Midjourney, some of the descriptions I had was Wizard of Oz movie interior, Emerald City as a photographic background, golden green cinematic glowing light. And so you'll notice that I said cinematic glowing light. I find that this technique works best when there are some light sources and color behind the subject, because then when I light the subject in front of that background, it makes it look like the two are unified, much more like they're actually in the scene. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to analyze the lighting and build it in one by one. Now, I have been doing this a lot. I find it really fun. It allows me to expand my creativity, and I've actually linked to an example of this that I've done in the past in the description below. So let's start off with just a couple considerations if you want this technique to work. First and foremost, you need to eliminate ambient light. You need to turn off overhead lights. You need to put curtains over the windows. It needs to be as dark as possible. And as I'm lighting my subject, I need to keep in mind that any light from strobes, continuous light, ambient light, any of that light that hits the background, it's going to wash it out and make it look flat. So for that reason, you'll notice that the lights that I'm going to be using in this scene are using a lot of grids, which control the spill of light, or I'm using very tight lights for pockets of light to prevent any spread of light that would bounce and then wash out the background. So let's begin by taking a shot of my Emerald City with my subject in the foreground. So I'll start by turning off all of the other lights. All right, so it's not looking like much yet, but you'll notice that background is looking pretty saturated. It has a lot of contrast to it, and that's because I don't have any other lights interfering with that. So as I'm looking at the scene, I'm seeing the golden light in the background. So the first two lights I'm going to introduce are intended to help unify the subject with the scene. And so on both sides of the frame, I have 1 by 4 foot stripped softboxes with grids. And then I've added gels to those lights, kind of a yellow warm gel, in order to mimic the color of the light in the background. So let's take a look at what it looks like with those two rim lights. All right, so looking at the image, now what you can see is there's this beautiful warm glow on either side of the subject's hair and body, which unifies her with the background a little bit more because we've matched that color. However, you'll also notice there's some other side effects. The background has lost its contrast and the color is shifted a little bit. And that's because even though we're using modifiers with grids, the light is still going to bounce. It's going to bounce off the white floor, the walls around it. So you have a couple of choices. First and foremost, you could add V-flats. By placing V-flats in between the lights and the background, it'll help block a little bit of that bounce. Furthermore, you could put V-flats around the space. All of that would help give you back some of your contrast. Alternatively, you can also fix it in post. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of AI selection tools that would allow you to easily select the background and add your contrast back in. So it depends on the tools you have as well as the time you have. All right, so I like what the shot is looking like. And then I need to analyze what else can I do to make it look realistic or fitting my vision. And here's the part where you have to consider, what do you have available? How many lights do you have? What do you need to really make it convincing, and what will you do in camera versus post? So what I'm going to do here is I am going to use several more lights because I have them available, but I'm not saying that all of them are necessary. Sometimes a change in color with another light could actually be done with a little bit of color grading. So for example, the next light that we have is actually on a floor stand behind my subject, and it is pointed back at her to give a little bit more glow and separation. It's got a yellow gel on it, a CTO, because the light wouldn't just be lighting from the sides. You can actually see when you look at the scene that there's warmth bouncing off of the ground behind her. In fact, there's a little bit of a door or an opening behind her. So by adding that additional light on a floor stand, it'll unify her just a bit more. Is it necessary? Probably not. Do I think it adds just a little bit something more? Yeah. So let's add that third light. All right, so for example, what you'll see is just a little bit more of glow of light in the negative space between her arms and her body. Okay, so what's next? Obviously, we don't have a light for her face yet, but I want to think about what would unify her with the background. And so there's one more tool that we're going to add for that purpose. On the right-hand side of the frame, we're actually going to be mixing and matching continuous lights and strobe, which is what we're already doing. The projector is a continuous light. The strobes around are going to be quick pulses of light. So for this next light, as I look at the scene, it would make sense, not only would she have the warmth on her hair and in the background, but probably green. If she's in the Emerald City and all of those green walls, the light is going to be bouncing off the green. And so there will definitely be some green in the shadows or a bit of shine on her face. So the next light on the right-hand side is a Nanlite Pavo tube. It's a 2-foot Pavo tube and we're going to turn it to green. Now you'll also notice that there are these flaps in the front. We're using barn doors or a grid to control the spill of light because we don't want it to hit the background, because yet again, that would also shift the color. So let me add our Emerald City light. All right, so I really love what this is doing, and it's giving her this beautiful green light, and it's even a little bit low, which I think is nice, because realistically, there'd probably be some bounce off of the floor. So last but not least is our main light. And the main light, I'm not really making realistic to light in the space. It's an illumination on her, or maybe like a hard light coming in through a doorway. So the last light is my favorite modifier. We have the Westcott optical spot with a 150mm lens to the left-hand side of the frame to create a slice of light on the face. So there are all the core ingredients that we need to make a shot like this work. Let me give you just a couple other things to consider. I recommend using a lens that allows you to shoot at a wider aperture. For example, here I'm shooting with the Canon R5 Mark II and the RF 24 to 105mm lens, but this is the 2.8. That's going to allow me to shoot at 2.8, which is what I'm doing here, to blur out the background, to soften a little bit, to make it have a depth of field like she is on location. Next up, something you could consider is adding a filter, maybe something to soften the image a little bit. The background looks a little soft and maybe washed out, but then she will look crisp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a black pro mist. This is a 1-strength black pro mist, and what that does is it makes everything look a little hazier, it decreases the contrast in the image, and I think it'll make it look just a little bit more realistic. You can see here that there's no trace of the white background. We have completely transported our subject. So the finishing touches are of course going to be how my subject's moving in the frame, interacting with the light. Maybe it's things like our final color grade. For example, matching the color of her dress to the greens in the background, adding a little bit of color to the shadows, for example, to make it look like she's on location. But as you can see, the projector is doing the heavy lifting, then you need to analyze the light to make it look like the subject is in that scene. No more boring white background. All right, so with that, let's get our shot. Now, a boring white background probably doesn't seem so boring to you anymore. In fact, if you just have a white wall available to you, you can see how much you can transform that to fit the concept of your shoot. Now, don't get me wrong, I certainly shoot on a white background, but when it's appropriate, when it fits the concept, I don't let it make me feel restricted. Instead, I use my lighting magic to free me. So if you want to see the gear that I use to make these images, be sure to check out the links in the description below. And as always, visit adorama.com. And I have a lot of videos that go through this sort of creative technique. So you're going to want to like and subscribe so you can see more of those. And don't forget, if you love the creativity in this video, the techniques that I'm using, you can find in my creative lighting guides linked below. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you next time.